Hello my amazing people, and welcome back to my channel if you're back. If you're new though, hi, hello, welcome to my channel. I am Shayna and I have another case for you all today. This case was also recommended to me, just like the last video that I did, in my case request form, which is always the last link in the description box if you have a case that you'd like for me to take a look at. And we've actually talked about this one before because I've done videos on this case, and I wanted to revisit myself before the request even came through because this case had so many unanswered questions that were finally answered at the end of last year, kinda. So you'll see what I mean once we get to the end. Many of you are probably already familiar with this case, and I'd love to hear all of your thoughts in the comment section below. Whether you are familiar or not, please let me know what you think. Today we are going to be discussing the murder of Alexis Sharkey, someone who seemed to have a perfect life. So her passing was very polarizing and very shocking for a lot of people. Without further ado, thank you guys so very much for stopping by my channel today on this beautiful Sunday. I hope you're doing well. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Alexis Robinault was born on January 25th, 1994 in Pennsylvania and grew up in a very happy and tight-knit family alongside two sisters. She was super close to her mom and had a great relationship with her dad, and based on what we know, she had a very smooth, happy childhood. As a young girl, Alexis was always very kind and loving to the people around her. She was outgoing, so vibrant, and just a joy to be around and to spend time with. On top of all of this, she was described as an impressively witty and savvy person. She just had this mind that thought differently than everyone around her. She looked at things in a more analytical manner than most, and she had a more in-depth perspective. Her smarts were always apparent to everyone who got the opportunity to see how much she loved the simple act of learning things. Alexis was a member of the National Honor Society, and she knew that after high school she wanted to attend a four-year university to pursue higher learning. She wanted to get her degree, and she had this long-term goal of attending medical school one day. People in her life had absolutely no doubt that she could get in and that she would get in if that's what she followed through with. So for this reason, as she grew up and went through high school, there was a ton of excitement around the potential for her future and what was to come. Alexis went on to attend the University of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, where she would graduate at the top of her class in 2016 with a Bachelor of Science in Biology. After careful consideration, she decided to temporarily put her medical school dreams on hold just so that she could have some time off from school, take a little break, and enjoy her early 20s. After this decision to take a break, she made an even bigger decision to move to Odessa, Texas, which is very far away from where she was from in Pennsylvania. So this was a huge step, and she took on this new beginning with a positive outlook and ended up getting a job at Twin Peaks, which is what many would consider a sports bar, kind of restaurant type of vibe. Alexis loved her time working at Twin Peaks, and she started making new friends with her coworkers at the restaurant right away. Because of how outgoing and bubbly she was, forming friendships came naturally to her. People were just naturally drawn to her, and she could socialize with anyone. Her ability to befriend people helped to make the move to Odessa so much easier for her. But outside of her friendships, a plus for her was that it was warm in Texas. One of her dreams was to travel the world and to ultimately live in a place with a warmer climate year-round. That's kind of what she found in Texas. It was much warmer throughout the year than Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania gets very cold, and she just felt so good being in a place where it was warm weather. It just made her feel happy, and that was one of the many positives of moving to Texas for her. In 2018, Alexis began working for a multi-level marketing company called Monate. And MLMs kind of have a negative stigma about them, and I understand why. But Alexis had a very good experience working for Monate. She had her social media platforms that she had a very large following, probably, I believe, if I remember correctly, 20,000 followers on her Instagram account. She had a TikTok that she used. She also would vlog on YouTube. So she had a following in which she could promote her Monat products. With her success in the company, she worked her way up relatively quickly and found success. I mean, she was making money. Because she was making a substantial amount of money, she was able to travel the world. She looked like she was truly, genuinely happy. And it wasn't just that she looked like she actually was in real life. And you could tell through her social media. And if you were lucky enough to meet her in person, she just had this energy about her that you could tell that she was one of those genuinely content people. Around this same time, after moving to Texas, Alexis hit it off with a man named Tom, who was a regular at Twin Peaks. He would come in there often. He would socialize with the waitresses and Alexis's friends who worked there, and she really felt drawn to him, and the two began dating. And Alexis would talk to her friends about how happy she was and how crazy she was about Tom, in a good way. She would mention that he was a gentle giant. He was of larger build. He was kind of stocky, especially compared to how tiny she was. And she would just say how sweet and down to earth he was and how much she enjoyed her time dating him. The two seemed to really get along and have a great relationship in the beginning. Now, Tom was about 23 years older than Alexis, which was, you could say, surprising to some people. The two didn't seem like your typical couple because of their age difference alone. But regardless of this, Alexis was smitten with him, and it seemed like they had a beautiful dynamic between the two of them, with much of their love story actually being documented on Alexis's Instagram, on her YouTube, and also on her TikTok for all to see. After being together for some time, the two of them uprooted and made a big move to Colorado together, where eventually Tom would decide to propose to Alexis in June of 2019. Absolutely sure that she wanted to be with him, she said yes enthusiastically, and the two began to plan their future together. Just 6 months later, they got married at a courthouse and were officially husband and wife. In January of 2020, Alexis and Tom decided that they wanted to move back to the Texas area, but this time they decided to move to Houston instead of Odessa, where she was staying before. And when she moved to Houston, Alexis didn't have any friends in that immediate area. She was someone who was very popular and well known and kind of had friends in many places after going to college and working for Monat and working at Twin Peaks. So she knew a lot of people, but she wanted a tight-knit friend group that was right there in her area that she could hang out with and spend time with and get to know. So she decided to download Bumble BFF, which you can think of like a dating app, except it's for platonic relationships. And she came across this friend group relatively quickly with a group of young ladies, about 7 of them, and she found that this was a really good friend group for her. And of the people that she met in this friend group, perhaps the person she became closest to was a young woman named Tanya. She and Alexis were like this. Aside from Tanya, Alexis was also close to the other women in the group as well. Now, in November of 2020, Alexis began having conversations with her friends about her marriage. She would talk to them about the good and a lot more of the bad now. And she would tell them things that they were definitely concerned to hear about. It's alleged that she confided in them that Tom had put his hands on her, that he had choked her, and that there was some serious domestic violence happening behind closed doors with the two of them. She told her friends that they weren't sleeping in the same bed anymore, and that she was just so unhappy that she was now considering divorce. Things were bad, and she told her friends that he made her afraid for her life. She was so ready to be done with him that she was ready to get the divorce papers and sign them and move on. Things are not always as they seem, because Alexis seemed to have the perfect relationship on her social media. And it's unknown at what point it took a turn or if it really was that way from early on in the relationship, but it truly did seem that at one point early on, Alexis was genuinely happy with Tom. and eventually things began to go downhill. However, as far as we know, she didn't really tell her family, and they weren't fully aware of the gravity of the problems between Alexis and Tom, like her friends eventually came to know. The Wednesday just before Thanksgiving of 2020, Alexis spoke with her mother on the phone since she knew that she obviously wouldn't be seeing her mom, who was still on the East Coast. And she was a really holiday-oriented person, Alexis was, so it was always hard to not be around her loved ones for the holidays. And she hadn't seen her mom in person for a while because of the panoramic. And she knew that because of this, she had to plan to go home soon. Like, just being away from her family for this long was uncomfortable for her. And since things really weren't going well in her relationship with Tom, I'm sure it probably made her want to go home even more. So she planned to go and visit her family for Christmas, which was just a month away at this point, and she was really looking forward to this time that she would have with her family. On the day of Thanksgiving, Alexis woke up. She sent some text messages to her family and her friends wishing everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and she made her way over to Tanya's house a little later that afternoon, where she planned to have Thanksgiving dinner. And you might think that a couple would go together, that Tom would accompany her, but he didn't. It was just Alexis. Presumably, they spent the holiday apart because things were not going well between the two of them. After Thanksgiving dinner, Alexis got picked up by a friend of hers named Sebastian, who took her out drinking for that evening. And Sebastian was actually a new acquaintance in her life. She had met him while she was on vacation in Tulum earlier in the month of November of this same year. While on vacation, they met and they realized that they actually lived in the same area back home. So they exchanged contact information, and on Thanksgiving evening, the two of them stayed out until about 3 a.m. just talking, hanging out, and drinking. The very next day on Black Friday, Alexis was not very active on her social media like she normally was, but she did text her friend group chat around 5:30 p.m. just to ask if maybe anyone wanted to hang out later and grab some drinks, but everyone was either busy or just wanting to stay in for that evening. So Tanya actually proposed that the next day everyone just come over all together to her house so they could have a movie night. And the friends all seemed to be up for this, including Alexis, who responded and said that she would absolutely be there. When that Saturday morning came, all of the women woke up, started exchanging text messages in their group chat, just talking about how excited they were for their movie night and confirming that they were all still going to be in attendance. And everyone kind of noticed Alexis's absence because she was always the friend who was active in the group chat, responding back quickly and right away. And they thought it was odd that she wasn't responding, but they became actually truly concerned when they all kind of pieced together that they individually hadn't talked to Alexis and she hadn't updated her social media since the evening before. It wasn't very often that an entire 12 hours would pass by without Alexis updating her social media account. So that, combined with the fact that she wasn't texting anyone back, made everyone worry.
Yeah, I thought everything was fine. And then the next morning I woke up really early. I sent a text to the group of girls. We have a shared chat and said, who's coming over, movie day or whatever. Alexis would have been the first person to respond. I mean, if I'm going to jail, Alexis is the first person I'm calling or texting because I know she's going to answer within seconds. So I started getting a little concerned and I said, this isn't normal. This isn't normal. And so all the girls kind of got together and we were like, okay, well, when was the last time you talked to her? When was the last time you talked to her? And they all said around 6 p.m. Friday.
Of course, caring for her friend's safety, Tanya decided to drive over to Alexis and Tom's place to check on Alexis herself when she couldn't get her on the phone. But when she got there, she banged on the door. Nobody was answering. She looked around, tried to see if maybe someone was home, but there was no sign of Alexis anywhere. And not sure what to do, she sat in her car outside for a little bit, just thinking of what her options were, and decided that it was best to call Alexis's mother to let her know that she was worried that something may be wrong with Alexis and that she couldn't get in contact with her or find her. And after calling her mom, Tanya was shocked to find out that her mom had already been made aware that Alexis was missing According to her, Tom had already called and told her that he couldn't find Alexis either. He apparently had made multiple phone calls since the evening before, asking around to mutual friends if anyone had seen her, to which everyone was telling him no up until this point. And he was telling people that the night before, he and Alexis got into an argument and Alexis left the house. After this, according to him, she didn't come back home. And Alexis's mom at this point was already aware of all of this. But the stories that Tom was telling about that night before just didn't line up right. It didn't sit well with everyone, the stories that he was telling. He said first that Alexis left her phone at home and that she was just missing. And then second, he said that when she left the house, she took it with her and that he had been attempting to track it. There was also confusion about the manner in which Alexis left, because he started off by saying that she left on foot, hopped a fence outside of where they lived, and then just ran away on foot. Then he changed it to her having left in a car, but the specifics about the car were unclear because there was a story that it was some sort of sporty sedan, and then there was also a story that she left in a black SUV. So his stories were just really conflicting. They weren't lining up. They weren't making sense to people. And everyone was just like, okay, so what actually happened? Because you're confusing us. On this day when the frenzy to find Alexis was going on, the same day that Tanya went and knocked on her door, there was a discovery made. A public works driver was driving his normal route where he typically drives his sanitation truck, and on the side of the road, he saw what he thought at the time were feet. When he looks, the feet are like so clean and pristine that he thinks he's actually looking at a mannequin, but he's not 100% sure, and he was too afraid to get closer to look to see for himself. So he decided to call his supervisor, who agreed to come down to the scene, where the two of them realized that this was in fact a human body, that they were looking at the remains of a young woman, not a mannequin. This young woman was completely naked. She had no signs of visible trauma anywhere on her body, and she was very clean. The worker said that she was so clean, almost as if she had just taken a bath or taken a shower. Even the bottom of her feet were clean, as though she had been carried and placed there. There was also, it's important to know, a storm the night before on Friday night. So she had to have ended up there after the storm because there was no mud on her. She wasn't wet from the storm. So it was very obvious that she had ended up here recently.
Ron Richardson, it's a Saturday morning he'll never forget.
It plays back in my head. You know, it's been playing back in my head every day.
He was at work for the City of Houston Solid Waste when Richardson says he got a call from an employee.
He said he thought he seen a body or a mannequin, so he wasn't for sure. He wasn't going to stop because he was kind of, you know he was scared or whatever case may be. So he asked me to come out there and check it out.
So as his supervisor, Richardson went to check it out and still can't believe what they found.
So as we was driving, we could see the feet, so we got out and looked. And there it was, she was laying there, deceased. She was no clothes on, and I just got on the phone and I called 911.
The medical examiner determined certainly that this young woman had passed away on Friday night and thus had to have been placed where she was found after this point, after the storm had passed. And sometime later, her cause of death was determined to be strangulation, and her manner of death was determined to be homicide. Not knowing that her body was found on Saturday morning, Alexis's friends called the police to report her missing on Saturday evening, actually, at which point they believed that she was still just missing. They would soon find out that she was gone. When her friends called in, it was matched up to the remains that were found, and Tom was called in to confirm her identity, at which point he did so, and it was determined that this young woman was in fact Alexis Sharkey and that she had passed away at only 26 years old. Something odd was that even though Tom had made many phone calls to friends and family, he never actually once called the police that we're aware of. Alexis's mother was actually the one who called the police in Texas to notify them of Alexis's situation. And from the very beginning, police thought that this was odd, that Tom wouldn't have called to let them know that his wife was missing. that her friends and her mom actually had to call before he did. After Alexis's body was found, Tom would stay under the radar for the most part. He wasn't out doing a ton of news interviews and media interviews, except for one that he did, which was an over-the-phone interview. And when he did this interview, it was very interesting because he described Alexis to be this depressed and low self-esteem kind of woman. And he said that he often needed to build Alexis up, that she relied on him for reassurance and to find her value and her worth. And it was interesting that he did this because, number one, everybody knew that it wasn't true. Alexis was a very happy, independent, and just vibrant and loving girl. From the time she was a girl to her current life, she was the exact opposite of the way he described her on a public platform. And number two, it was just odd and irrelevant to the case at all. It was information that was unnecessary and seemed like he wanted to say that to kind of maybe begin forming a narrative of what could have happened to her. Police's investigation was definitely focused on Tom, and because of his stories changing, because of his odd behavior, he just seemed suspicious to people. Alexis's mother spoke out actually via a news station at one point about her time dealing with Tom after Alexis had passed away. And the two of them had come to an agreement, essentially, that Alexis's remains were to be flown back home so that she could be buried where she grew up. And Tom, of course, agreed to this. He said that it wasn't a problem. And because he was next of kin, he was the only person who had the authority legally to make determinations for her remains. So this verbal agreement that Alexis's mother, Stacy, had made with him was very important that he followed through with it, because without his authorization, essentially no movement of her remains could take place. So after they come to this agreement, Tom literally vanishes. He falls off the face of the earth. He stops returning phone calls to Stacy, and he stops returning phone calls to the place that has Alexis's remains as well. So when the time is coming for her funeral service and her burial services to be planned and for her body to actually be moved across the country, Tom was nowhere to be found, making it impossible for Stacy to get her daughter's remains. And it got to the point where Stacy had to just call and ask the forensics lab directly if they could just give her the authority to release Alexis's body so that they could bury her. And eventually this forensics lab agreed because Tom wasn't answering any of their phone calls either, and they had to do something with Alexis's body. So that entire situation was just very odd, and it didn't make sense as to why Tom was being evasive to people who were just trying to make sure that Alexis had a proper burial. It was discovered that Tom actually fled the state. He left Texas after Alexis was found. This, of course, looked suspicious because innocent people typically don't run, and police knew that they had to keep their sights on him. They knew that they couldn't completely lose track of him because the spouse, significant other, is always usually a primary person of interest, especially in cases like this. So they knew that they had to track Tom down and figure out where he went to. They specifically wanted to meet with him to retrieve a DNA sample, actually. And when they called him in August of 2021 to ask for this sample, he told them that he would give it to them without issue. All they had to do was meet him where he was staying now, and he told them that he was staying in Georgia. So police, of course, began making their way to the address that Tom provided, and they found that he had once again fled. He was nowhere in the area to be found, but they knew that he had been at this address before. So once he found out that police were coming to collect his DNA sample, he left. And by this point, he was really under a microscope because of how shady he was moving. It was just super shady behavior. Like I said, innocent people don't run, but if the first time he left was a coincidence, the second time definitely was not. Police were able to get their hands on information of Tom's whereabouts the second time that they were now looking for him, and they realized that he had fled to Fort Myers, Florida. In this area, he had relatives, and so it made sense that he would be staying here. And police knew that they couldn't do the approach the same way that they did the last time, because clearly letting him know that they were coming was a bad idea. he was obviously a flight risk. So they knew that they had to keep it under wraps. Also, aside from making sure Tom didn't find out directly from them, they had to make sure the media didn't find out, because this case was so well known at the time that people were talking about it left and right. And Tom could have easily found out from a media outlet or a news outlet any information relatively quickly that the police may have shared with the media or news outlet. So they kept this under wraps, that they knew that he was in Florida. And around the same time, they actually issued an arrest warrant on September 29th of 2021. This arrest warrant was for the death of Alexis Sharkey, and now the next step was to move silently and go in for his arrest without warning. On October 6th of 2021, just about a week later, police knock on the door of the residence where Tom is staying. And he is there. He sees the police, they see him, and after he realizes what they are there for, he turns around, he runs upstairs, he grabs a firearm, and he uses it to take his own life.
At age 26, Alexis Sharkey lost her life to murder. Strangled. The woman's body left on the side of West Houston Road. Her mother, Stacy Robinette, told me her family always suspected Alexis's husband.
Well, I will admit that we have felt that Tom was guilty of this from pretty much the beginning.
Tom Sharkey died by suicide in Fort Myers, Florida this week as federal agents went to arrest him for his wife's 2020 killing.
Are you surprised that he ended his life?
Yes, I am. I just really thought that it would end with a trial and that he would come in and make his case. And he chose to not go that way.
In a lengthy, honest conversation, Robinette told me from her Pennsylvania home, it's been a painful year.
Loss of life it's never good. But I do feel like, in a way, he did serve himself justice.
What's even more upsetting, Alexis's family still doesn't have her belongings, including her 3 pets, back.
We begged him for her cats because they were like her children, and we just wanted to have something. Sorry. We just wanted to have something of hers.
Sharkey, who often took to Instagram to share her own life, also shared her love for her cats online. On this IG account, you can see her beloved brown Bengal named Asia and her gray cat named Smokey.
Nothing. It's all gone. It was all taken from the apartment. It was, we asked Tom for it many times, and he would tell us that, I'll get it to you, I'm going through it. And then he ghosted us, and we have no idea where any of it's at.
Robinette said apartment management told her Tom's friends cleaned out the unit shortly after he fled Houston. She'd love to have her daughter's items back, saying it'd be something after such a heartbreaking 10 months.
I'm super sorry for Tom's family. It's just such senseless loss that has happened with my daughter, and then him. I'm just sorry for all of that. It's just beyond. It's been a horrific year.
HPD says this murder case will likely be closed soon, now that Tom Sharkey, the one and only suspect, is dead. In Houston tonight, Steve Campion, 13 Eyewitness News.
Headquarters, Janelle, what else are police telling you?
Well, guys, last night, U.S. Marshals showed up to the home where Tom Sharkey was staying in Fort Myers, Florida, but say after he found out they were there, he went upstairs and took his life. She was full of life and lots of laughs.
This is why we don't have any pictures together.
Almost a year ago today, Alexis Sharkey was posting to social media about her favorite holiday, posing alongside her husband, Tom, having no idea the heartbreaking fate that lay in front of her. It's been 10 months since Alexis Sharkey's body was found by a city worker on the side of the road along I-10, but today, finally, some closure.
The intent was, once he was arrested, to formally charge him in Harris County with her murder.
Houston police acknowledge it's taken almost a year to find out who killed Alexis Sharkey, but finally they had enough evidence to get an arrest warrant for her husband, Tom. They say he became evasive and was untruthful throughout the investigation. U.S. Marshals found him yesterday in Fort Myers, Florida.
They were able to make contact and establish that he was inside the residence. Mr. Sharkey avoided them, ran upstairs when he learned that law enforcement was there for him, and he took his own life using a firearm.
Investigators learned the husband and wife were on the brink of divorce. They were separated, and police say there was a history of domestic violence. But investigators are staying tight-lipped on what happened that night Alexis was killed, and say all the public attention made this case that much harder to solve.
This dramatic ending was unexpected and very unfortunate and disappointing because Alexis's family essentially through this was robbed of an explanation, of a why, of an answer as to why did you do this to our loved one. While we can't say with absolute 1000% certainty that he would have been found guilty in the court of law, in the court of public opinion, he was definitely considered guilty from the beginning. I mean, from before her cause of death was even released, which was a couple months after she passed away. Everyone has kind of had this gut feeling that Tom was responsible. And there were reasons why. Like, we had an unhappy marriage. We had domestic violence. We had an impending divorce. We had Tom changing his stories. We had his bizarre behavior. There were a lot of reasons, justified reasons, for people to believe that he had to be involved somehow. And police were able to determine that there were no other persons of interest. Tom was the only person who had both the means and the motive to commit this crime and to take Alexis's life. I remember making my videos about this back when it was going on, and the general consensus back then was that, like I said, that he was guilty, but it's obvious now, and it's kind of a situation where we have a resolution, but at the same time, not really, because there was no trial, there was no pleading guilty. But I really do send my thoughts out to Alexis's family. This case was just so public and it was talked about so much that I send my condolences to her family. I hope that they are doing okay. Also to Tom's family, because they didn't ask for this, obviously, and I know that he had children from a prior marriage, so I hope that they're doing okay. This is all just a big mess and extremely unfortunate. Be sure to let me know what you guys think about this case. I definitely was invested from the beginning, and I knew that I wanted to do a follow-up conversation with you guys about it, because it was kind of left open-ended on my channel, at least. But yeah, definitely curious to hear what you guys think. I want to know your thoughts. I want to know your opinions. And let's have a healthy dialogue in the comment section about this one. You know what I'm going to say, you guys. If you made it this far, you are loyal. You really are, and I appreciate you. I hope you have an incredible week. I hope you have a great day. I hope your Sunday's going well. And I am just happy to be here with you guys again and to hang out for a little bit of time. I want you to write down something that you want to accomplish this week, because that is what I need to do. Write something down that I want to accomplish and actually get it done. And maybe I'll let you know next week how it goes. Maybe. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for stopping by today, as always. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you, guys. Peace.